This is my pre-algebra course. Today we're going to review for test number 2. If you haven't done the homework completely and correctly from the last class, do that homework before watching this video. As in the last test, we're going to prepare for test number 2 by doing 2 practice tests. We're going to do a practice test right now together, and I'm going to give you a practice test for homework. So, but you need to understand, as I mentioned for the test number 1, these 2 practice tests are not the only thing that you need to study to prepare for the test. You need to go back to my classes and do enough problems to make sure that you're ready for the test. And remember, you can go to the screenshots that you took of all the work that we did in the previous classes to help you prepare for the exam. You don't have to go back and watch every video. And if you didn't take screenshots, just go to the very end of the videos and you'll see where I show all the work that we did, so you can take screenshots and do those problems for practice. So with that said, let's get into practice test 2, version 1. Solve -3 plus x equals 8. So this is a one-step equation, and we're going to perform one operation on the equation. So because we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation, you have to rewrite the equation. And then you can go ahead and perform the operation. So we have to isolate x. We have to get x by itself. So x is not by itself because the -3 is here. So the opposite of adding -3 is adding +3. And we're left with x is equal to 11. These 3's cancel out, and 8 plus 3 is 11. Now we have another one-step equation here. And by the way, you can attempt these problems on your own. It's probably best to do that. And then after you're done, you can check to see if the answer is right when I finish the problem myself. So go ahead and pause the video and try these. So we have to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. So we have to rewrite the equation. And this is 4 times y. So we have to do the opposite of 4 times y, which is y divided by 4. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. And y is equal to -3. All right, so again, another one-step equation. We're going to have to perform an operation on both sides, so we have to rewrite. And if you don't rewrite the equation, you're going to get points taken off. Subtract 9 from both sides, and we get -5. And of course, if you don't rectangle your answer, you're going to get points taken off also. All right, so number 4, another one-step equation. We're starting off easy, and we show multiplication with parentheses. And if you write the expression like so, then you're going to get a point taken off because this looks like -8 minus 6. It's -8 times -6, or excuse me, -8 times -6. So we get x is equal to 48. All right, so now we have a 2-step equation. So we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation, which means we have to rewrite the equation. We're going to get rid of the 3 first. So we have -3 over here and 2y over here. Now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equations, on both sides of the equation again. So we have to rewrite again, and then we divide both sides by 2, and y is equal to -3/2. And again, you can put this negative where it is here next to the fraction line, or you can put it up here, or you can put it down here, but putting it in the denominator is very unusual, so you probably want to stay away from that. So if you got -3/2, good job. So now we have another two-step equation. We're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. So notice that I rewrote the equation. And we perform the operation. We're going to get rid of that 4 first. We have z over 3 is equal to negative 11. And I'm going to rewrite because I'm going to perform another operation on both sides of the equation, and I have to put the negative 11 in parentheses because we don't want it to look like 3 minus 11. And we get negative 33. So if you got negative 33, good job. We have another two-step equation. We're going to start by performing an operation on both sides of the equation, so we're going to rewrite the equation. And the first thing we're going to do is get rid of the 10, so we add 10 to both sides. Negative 5 plus 10 is 5. These 10s cancel out. And it's very important to understand that this negative goes with the x over 4. The negative is directly to the left of x over 4. So that means that it goes with the x over 4. So that's a potential source of error for students. Now we can take this negative and we can pretend that it's down there with the 4. And then we just multiply both sides. Well, actually first we have to rewrite because we're about to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. I should write that a little bigger. And then to get rid of that negative 4, we're going to multiply both sides by negative 4. Again, you have to multiply by negative 4. You have to get rid of the 4 and the negative. So x is equal to negative 20. All right, another two-step equation. We're going to start by rewriting because we have to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. And we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. And we're going to rewrite again and perform an operation on both sides of the equation. And we have y is equal to 1/8. So if you got 1/8, good job. All right, now we move on to three-step equations. Now, in three-step equations, the first step is always going to be to simplify one side of the equation. So that means that we're not performing an operation on both sides of the equation, we're just simplifying. So we don't have to rewrite this equation. We just simplify. 5z minus 8z is negative 3z. So now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. So now we have to rewrite the equation. All right, 16 minus 7 is 9. And be very careful because that negative goes with the 3z. And now we are going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation in step 3. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 3, and we get z is equal to, z is equal to negative 3. Because 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. All right, so now we have another two-step equation. So again, we don't have to rewrite, we just want to simplify the right side of the equation. So negative 6x plus 1x is negative 5x. Now you should know by now that when you have an x by itself, it's considered to be 1x, even though there's no coefficient here. So negative 6x plus 1x is negative 5x. So now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation on the second step. So we have to rewrite the equation so we can preserve the result of the first step. And then we're going to subtract 1 from both sides. And now we're going to do the third step, which is performing an operation on both sides of the equation. So we're going to rewrite. Again, the whole purpose of all this is to isolate x, get it by itself. So now we have x is equal to 2/5. So if you got 2/5, or 2/5, good job. All right, so number 11, again, we're just going to simplify the left side of the equation. And we get negative 10y if we add those y's together. Remember, that's condensed notation. And now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation in step 2. So we have to rewrite that equation. One minus 3 is negative 2. And these 3's cancel out, which is why we did that. And again, make sure that negative goes with the 10, because the negative is right to the left of the 10, which means it has to go with the 10. All right, so now we're going to do the third step, which is performing an operation on both sides of the equation. So we have to rewrite the equation and perform the operation. So now something special is going to happen because we do have to reduce this fraction. First of all, a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so we know that our answer is going to be positive. These negatives are just going to go away. And we can reduce 2 over 10. Divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we got 1/5. Good job. All right, we have another three-step equation for number 12. Z minus 2z is negative z, negative 1z. And I should probably move this over a little bit. You always want to try to keep these equal signs lined up. The equal sign should always be straight down. Sometimes you might have to move it over a tiny bit, but try your best to keep it so that the equal signs are all lined up. It just makes it easier for the person who's reading your work to see the progression of your work. All right, so now we're going to get rid of 8, but we have to rewrite the equation first. And minus 8 on both sides. And we get negative 4 over here and negative z. Again, that negative goes with the z. How do I know this negative goes with the z? Because it's directly to the left of the z, which means it's on the z. The z owns it. All right, so now, again, you can just consider negative z to be negative 1z, and then we can kind of see what's going on here. So I rewrote the expression, but I put a 1 there, so you can see what's going on, and now we just divide both sides by negative 1. So now z is equal to 4. So we got 4, good job. All right, so now we're going on to equations requiring 4 or more steps. So the first step is going to be to simplify the left and the right side of the equation. So we don't have to rewrite because all we're doing is simplifying. So we're going to add all the x's together. Negative 3x plus 2x is negative 1x, and negative 1x minus 8x is negative 9x. So I combined all those x's in one step. So that 5, you can just keep it there. This 5 I put here. And you could put the 5 on this side. It doesn't really matter. All right, now 7 minus 8 is negative 1. And negative 1 plus 3 is 2. So I reduced that nasty-looking equation all the way down to a two-step problem. So now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. So that means we have to rewrite the equation. And again, our instincts are telling us to get rid of the negative 9 first, but that's actually much harder to do. So we want to get rid of the 5 first. 2 minus 5 is negative 3. 5 cancel out on the left side of the equation. And now we're ready to perform another operation on both sides of the equation. So we rewrite, and we got to get rid of that negative 9. X is equal to, and negative divided by negative is a positive, and 3 over 9, that reduces to 1 over 3. Just divide both sides of the fraction by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1, 9 divided by 3 is 3. All right. So if you got that answer, 1/3, good job. So now we have an even bigger equation. Again, the first step is to simplify, so you don't have to rewrite the equation. So negative 1 plus negative 3 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 8 is 4. 4 minus 7 is negative 3. And negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. So all that ended up being negative 4. And then we're going to add 4 and negative 3 and 1. So 4 minus 3 is 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. And now we're going to combine the y's. 10y plus 7y is 17y. 17y plus negative y is 16y, because remember, negative y is the same thing as negative 1y. All right, so let's just double check this, make sure we did everything correctly. Everything looks correct. So now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. So we're going to rewrite the equation. And we subtracted 2 from both sides, and now we have reduced it to negative 6 equals 16y. So now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation again, so we have to rewrite the equation. And we're going to get rid of that 16, so we got to divide both sides by 16. Because when a number is next to a letter, that means multiplication, so you have to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division, and we show division in algebra with the fraction sign. So y is equal to negative 6 over 16, but we can reduce that. If you divide both these numbers by 2, then you get 3 over 8. So if you got negative 3 over 8, good job. All right. So again, the first step is simplifying. Negative 7z plus 4z is negative 3z. Negative 3z plus 1z is negative 2z. Now, why is this 1z? Because there's nothing in front of it, so it's just assumed to be 1. And we'll just rewrite that negative 3, and then we just have to combine these. Negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4. And negative 4 minus 9 is negative 13. So now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. So we rewrite the equation. And again, we want to get rid of everything. We want z to be by itself, so we have to get rid of the negative 2 and the minus 3. So the opposite of subtracting 3 is adding 3. And again, that negative goes with the 2z. So now we're going to perform another operation on both sides of the equation. So we have to rewrite the equation. And then we'll go ahead and perform that operation. We're going to divide both sides by negative 2. And we get 5. So if you got 5, good job. All right, so at number 16, we're back to, well, looks like this is going to be a two-step problem. So in two-step problems, you always rewrite the problem first. At least in these types of problems you do. You may find a two-step problem somewhere where you don't have to rewrite. But in my problems, you're always going to have to rewrite. So then we subtract 8 from both sides. And on the right side, we get negative 7. On the left, we're left with negative x. And remember, negative x is the same thing as negative 1x. So you can divide both sides by negative 1 to get rid of that negative 1. Because again, we have to get x by itself. It's not by itself because the negative is still there. And then x is equal to positive 7. So if you got positive 7, good job. All right, so now we're back to a three-step equation. So the first step is to simplify. Negative 4z plus 5z is 1z. But remember, you don't write 1z, you just write z. That's just traditional. And let's move this stuff over. So now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation, so we have to rewrite the equation. And we add 3 to both sides. And we get negative 1. So z is equal to negative 1. We didn't have to do any more with that because z was isolated pretty quickly. All right, on to number 18. So now we have a two-step equation, so we're going to go ahead and rewrite the equation to preserve the original problem. Now we're going to add 2 to both sides. And we get 0 over here, and these 2's canceled out, which is why we did that. Z over 5 is equal to 0. Now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation, so we have to rewrite the equation. And we want to get rid of this division. We're dividing by 5, so the opposite of dividing by 5 is multiplying, and we show multiplication with parentheses. So z is equal to 0 times 5 is 0. So if you got 0, good job. So now we have another two-step equation. So we're going to start by rewriting. Now we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. This is condensed notation. It means negative 10 plus negative 4 is negative 14. Then I'm going to rewrite that negative x as negative 1x. And now we can see that all we have to do is divide by negative 1. And we get x is equal to 14. So if you got 14, good job. All right, so this is our first problem where we have fractions. So we cannot combine these y's unless we get a common denominator. So we're going to multiply both sides of this fraction by 2 to get 6y over 8. And remember, this term looks like a whole number term, so you're going to write it as over 1. And the coefficient here, again, it's just 1. If there's no coefficient there, it's just assumed to be 1. So now we're going to have to multiply. We're going to have to multiply both sides of this fraction by 8 to get negative 8y over 8 is equal to 4. So let me just double check that. Everything looks good. We have a common denominator now. So now we're ready to combine these y's because they have a common denominator. 6y over 8 plus 1y over 8 is 7y over 8. I combine these two. Again, 6y over 8 plus 1y over 8 is 7y over 8. And again, that's 1y because when y is by itself, the coefficient is 1. So 7y over 8, and then 7y over 8 minus 8y over 8. That would be negative 1y over 8. But again, we don't write the 1, we just write negative y. So now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation to get rid of that 8. Now again, we could take this negative and we could put it down here, or we can just keep it up here. The easiest way to do it is to put it down here. Then you only have to do one step. But if you keep it up here, let me show you what happens. You have to do more than one step. So we're going to multiply both sides by 8 to get rid of that division of the 8. So those are going to cancel out, and I should probably put parentheses around the fraction just to avoid confusion. So we get 32, and the 8's cancel out, and we're left with negative y. So that's why this takes an extra step doing it this way, because the negative is still there. You could have got rid of the negative in one step like we did in the previous problem. So now we're going to have to divide both sides by negative 1. And y is equal to negative 32. So negative 32. Now here we have a three-step problem with fractions. So again, we have to combine those z's, and we cannot combine those z's unless we get a common denominator because they're fractions. So we're going to multiply both sides of this fraction by 4. And both sides of this fraction by 3. And now that we have a common denominator, we can go ahead and add those, combine those fractions. So 8z over 12 minus 3z over 12 is 5z over 12. And now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. So we have to rewrite. And subtract 3 from both sides. And we get 5z over 12 is equal to negative 4. So now we're going to get rid of that 12. So we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. So we have to rewrite. And we're going to use parentheses for multiplication as usual. But remember, you have to put the 12 in parentheses and the 4, or else it looks like 12 minus 4. So the 12s are going to cancel out, and you're left with 5z. Now 12 times negative 4, that's not one of our multiplication facts, but you can just do that off to the side if you want, and that should be 48, negative 48. So now we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation again. So we have to rewrite. And we're going to get rid of that 5. And our final answer, z is equal to negative 48 over 5. And that fraction cannot be reduced. It's an improper fraction, but remember in algebra we don't really care about improper fractions so much. You could change it to a mixed number, but most mathematicians at this level, they don't even think about it. All right. So now we're on to another problem with fractions. We're going to have to combine these fractions. So first I'm going to go ahead and combine these numbers. So negative 4 minus 3 is negative 7. Negative 7 minus 8 is negative 15. So we combined all of those. And I'm going to go ahead and combine these numbers. Positive 1 plus negative 2 is negative 1. And now we're going to have to get a common denominator. So we're going to multiply both sides of this fraction by 3. And both sides of this fraction by 6. And both sides of this fraction by 2. And you can see that we now have a common denominator. So let's just double check that, make sure we did everything correctly. Looks like we did. So now we can combine those. 3x over 18 minus 12x over 18 is negative 9x over 18. Negative 9x over 18 plus 10x over 18 is 1x over 18. And so now we have a two-step algebraic equation. So now we're going to have to rewrite because we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. Add 1 to both sides. Negative 14. X over 18 is equal to negative 14. Now on this part, well, first of all, let's go ahead and rewrite because we're going to perform the last step. We're going to get rid of that 18. And I can see that we're going to need to either get a calculator or you can just do it off to the side over here. So 18 times 14, 4 times 8 is 32, carry the 3. 4 times 1 is 4, plus 3 is 7. Put a placeholder. 1 times 8 is 8, 1 times 1 is 1. Add 72 and 180, and you get 252. So our answer is negative 252. So those were big numbers there that we had to use. All right, so on to number 23. 23 is going to be pretty easy. It's a two-step equation, so we're just going to rewrite. Subtract 5 from both sides. Now we're going to perform the second step, so we have to, in the second step, we're going to perform an operation on both sides of the equation, so rewrite and then perform your operation. And we get y is equal to 0 over negative 7. Now, anytime you have a 0 in the numerator of a fraction, the fraction is just going to be 0. So y equals 0. So if you got 0, good job. All right, so now we have another three-step equation. Actually, this is going to be a four-step equation now that I look at it. So the first step is to simplify. So on the left side of the equation, we have negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. And then here we have negative 2z minus 5z is negative 7z. Now we need to perform an operation on both sides of the equation, so we have to rewrite the equation. And we're going to subtract 7 from both sides. And we're going to perform the last step, so we divide both sides by negative 7. And we get z is equal to 12 over 7. All right, so on to number 25. We're on the last problem now. So you may have noticed that I'm doing these problems quickly. That's because you've done a lot of these problems already, so you should be fairly well versed. I'm just giving you an idea of what the test is going to be like. So we have an equation requiring more than 4 steps. So the first step here is to simplify. I'm going to simplify the left side of the equation first, or excuse me, the right side of the equation. Negative 7 plus 1 is negative 6. Negative 6 minus 8 is negative 14. And I'm going to add negative 6 and negative 8. You get negative 14 again. Whoops. And these fractions already have a common denominator, so I'm going to go ahead and add those. Negative 2x over 5 plus 1x over 5 is negative x over 5. Now I have to move those over so we can fit the 4x in there. So we did a lot. We simplified the right side of the equation to negative 14. And we combine these two x's, and we combine these numbers. So now, let's go ahead and find a common denominator for those x's. So we're going to multiply, well, first of all, we're going to write that 4x as over 1. It's a whole number term, so you can always write whole number terms as over 1. So I'm going to multiply both sides of this fraction by 2. And I'm just going to get rid of the parentheses and the negative sign. I could just write minus x over 10. That's condensed notation. Then I'm going to multiply both sides of this expression by 10 to get 40x over 10. And just rewrite the rest of the equation. So let's double check that to make sure everything's correct. Everything looks correct. So now we can combine these fractions because they have a common denominator. So negative 2x over 10 minus 1x over 10 is negative 3x over 10. And negative 3x over 10 plus 40 over 10, 40x over 10 is 37x over 10. All right, so everything that we did up till now was just simplifying. But now we have to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. So we have to rewrite the equation. And we're going to add 14 to both sides. Now we have to isolate x, so we have to get rid of that 10. So we're going to have to rewrite the equation because we're about to perform an operation on both sides of the equation. And we're going to multiply by 10 to get rid of that 10 because that's the opposite of division, and the fraction line means division. So then we get 37x is equal to 0. So now we have to perform another operation on both sides of the equation, so we rewrite. And when a number is next to a letter, that means multiplication, so we have to do the opposite of multiplication to get rid of the 37. And the opposite of multiplication is division, and we show division with the fraction line. Again, this is all stuff that you should know by now because you've done a lot of these problems. So now we get x is equal to 0 because any fraction with 0 in the numerator is just going to be 0. I should probably rewrite that. Whoops. So now that was the practice test. So that's what the practice test is going to be like. Now, again, I was moving quickly because I'm very, very used to these types of problems. but you may want to go a little slower just to make sure that you've got the idea. But once you see exactly how to do these problems, the speed is going to start to increase, and you may be able to finish the test in that took about 40 minutes. But you can take up to 2 hours if you want. There's no rush. But you should finish the test in less than 2 hours. Here's all the work that we did today. If you'd like to take screenshots of these pages to help you with the test, go ahead and do that now. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the homework. Here's the homework. So take a screenshot of that. And here's the answers. So you're going to probably want to time yourself when you take that practice test. And again, the most important thing to understand is that these practice tests are designed to help you figure out what the test is going to be like. But doing these practice tests alone is not going to be enough to prepare you for the exam. You need to go back and look at the notes, all the screenshots you took of all the work that we did in the previous classes. And again, you can find images of all the work that we did for each class at the end of the video, or at the end of each video, and you can take screenshots so you don't have to watch all the videos over again. So that was a review for test number 2, and the next class is going to be test number 2. So make sure you study properly. And as always, if I didn't mention, the test is going to be 25 problems, 4 points each, for a total of 100 points. So I look forward to seeing you in the next class.